Do you think he even knows I'm sleeping with someone else? She asked the question while chewing shrimp, wiping her mouth with a napkin that had our family's monogram on it. The table went quiet. Even the baby monitor in the corner of the kitchen seemed to cut out for a second. They were all there, my parents, my older brother Felix, my cousin Riley, and Dana, my wife. The woman who, just moments before, had passed me the gravy like everything was fine. The thing is, she didn't know I had walked back in. I'd stepped out to grab a bottle of wine we'd left in the garage fridge. Took me less than 40 seconds. Long enough, apparently, for my wife to make a joke that wasn't a joke to a room full of people I shared blood with. Nobody laughed. My dad actually flinched. Dana didn't notice. She kept eating. She's just kidding, Felix said, forcing out a chuckle that had nowhere to land. I mean, not really, Dana added, as casually as if she were discussing the weather. Sometimes I wonder if Curtis is even awake. Like emotionally. He notices stains on the curtains but not the gaping hole in our marriage. I didn't walk in. Not yet. I stood in the hallway, holding that wine bottle like it might shatter from the heat in my hands. That's how I found out. That's how my marriage died. Not with a confrontation. Not with a fight or a confession or a text on a phone I wasn't supposed to see. It died between bites of shrimp, in front of a crock pot full of mashed potatoes, during what was supposed to be a normal Wednesday dinner with my family. I didn't walk back into the kitchen. I backed away slowly, like I was avoiding a snake. I left the wine on the stairs, walked upstairs, packed 2 bags, one with clothes, one with documents, grabbed the set of keys she didn't know I still had from my friend Noah's fishing cabin upstate. I didn't take my charger, or my watch, or my toothbrush. I was out of the driveway by 8:17 p.m. By the time Dana texted me asking where I'd gone, I was already 70 miles north and watching fog roll over the edge of a lake that had no cell reception. And I didn't reply. Not then. Not for a long time. But I heard everything that followed. And believe me when I say that dinner was only the beginning. I didn't cry. Not on the drive. Not when I passed the last gas station with cell coverage. Not when the sign for Glenford Lake appeared through the fog. I just drove like the road had stolen all my thoughts. Every so often, my phone would buzz in the passenger seat, lighting up her name, Dana, wife. That label I never bothered to change, it stayed there like a rusted badge of my own denial. When I reached the cabin, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the car, engine off, hands on the wheel. The silence wrapped around me like a weighted blanket. I wasn't sure if I felt peace, numbness, or just the aftertaste of shock. Maybe all 3. No, I hadn't been up here in months, maybe a year. Dust coated the porch like forgotten snow. I unlocked the door with shaky fingers, remembering how I used to tease him about hiding from real life out here. Now I understood why he kept it so remote. No one comes looking for truth in the woods. Inside, the place smelled like cedar and old boots. I didn't unpack. Just dropped my bags, sank into the couch, and stared at the ceiling beams. They were uneven, imperfect. Unlike my marriage, which had been so polished on the outside, it could have passed for glass. But glass cracks quietly. I replayed the dinner scene 100 times in my head. Her voice. That mocking lilt. Do you think he even knows I'm sleeping with someone else? There was no emotion in it. Not anger. Not guilt. Just casual cruelty. At 11:42 p.m., my phone lit up again. Another message from her. Dana, why did you leave without saying anything? You're being dramatic. That word, dramatic, hit harder than I expected. Not hurt, not confused, not even, let's talk. Just a cold, dismissive flick of a word that reduced my entire exit to some kind of childish tantrum. But I didn't respond. I powered the phone off and shoved it into the kitchen drawer, next to a box of expired granola bars and a dead flashlight. I didn't want to hear her voice anymore, not through text, not in my memories, not even an apology. If she ever got that far. The next morning, I heard a knock. It wasn't Dana. It was Noah. Apparently, she had called him. Told him I stormed off mid-dinner and probably needed to cool down somewhere. She didn't tell him what she said. Of course not. But Noah's face told me he knew there was more. He handed me a coffee. Didn't ask questions at first. Just sat on the steps with me, both of us watching the fog dissolve into daylight. Eventually, he broke the silence. She's been cheating on you, hasn't she? I didn't answer. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I figured. That hit harder than the truth itself, the fact that someone else had figured. That I was the last to know. Like my entire life had been some inside joke I hadn't caught on to. Noah reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a small envelope. I didn't want to do this. But there's something you should see. Inside were 4 photographs. Grainy. Nighttime. A parking lot behind a restaurant I'd never been to. Dana. Leaning into the window of a car I didn't recognize. Smiling. Her hand on someone's shoulder. And then, in the last photo, her kissing him. Not just a kiss. That kiss. The kind you give when you've stopped pretending at home. I wanted to throw up. Or punch something. But all I did was whisper the word, how, to no one. Noah stood. She started seeing him in August. Some guy named Declan. I didn't want to get involved, man, but I saw her once. Thought it was a fluke. Then it kept happening. August. That was 4 months ago. 4 months of pretending. 4 months of sleeping beside me, hosting family dinners, planning vacations, folding laundry next to me like we were still teammates. And now I was looking at the evidence. The real thing. I held the photo in my hand for a long time. Not because I needed proof, but because I needed to finally feel it. The betrayal. The humiliation. The absurdity of being the man in the room who doesn't even know he's already been left. I looked at Noah. I think I'm done. He nodded again. Then don't go back. Not even to talk. Not even to fight. Let her speak to your silence. I stayed at the cabin for 3 more days. Long enough to feel the edges of my grief, but not long enough to dull them. Then, I did something Dana never expected. I went back home. Quietly. While she was at work. And I took something. But I'll get to that. I didn't go back for closure. Or confrontation. I went back for what was mine, or at least, what was still untouched by her. The house looked exactly as I left it. Our old Volvo still sat in the driveway, speckled with winter grit. There was a wreath on the door. She hadn't taken it down, though Christmas had passed weeks ago. Maybe she hadn't noticed. Or maybe she wanted the world to think we were still a normal, festive couple, the kind who argued about light placement, not loyalty. I still had the key. She hadn't changed the locks. She probably didn't think she needed to. Why would she? In her mind, I was the kind of man who would cool off, apologize, and beg to resume our beige routine. Dana always mistook silence for surrender. That's what made her dangerous. I stepped inside without a sound. It hit me instantly, the scent of her perfume. Still lingering in the hallway, like it owned the space. Everything looked untouched. My coat still hung on the rack. My boots lined up like I never left. But it felt like a stranger's home now, a museum of a marriage that died months before I noticed. I didn't head to the bedroom. I didn't want to see if his clothes were there, or if she was already sleeping on my side. I walked straight to the study. That room was mine. The one place Dana never truly occupied. It was where I kept the things that meant something before I met her, my dad's toolbox, my grandfather's camera, the first guitar I ever owned. She never cared about any of it. Said it made the house feel old. I told her that was the point. She never understood. I packed the guitar carefully. Took the photo albums, not the curated, Pinterest perfect ones we made together, but the ugly, real ones. The ones with yellowing pages and photos from childhood, camping trips, failed science fairs. Memories untouched by her edits. Then I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out the envelope I'd hidden 2 years ago. Inside, one backup hard drive, a key to my old storage unit, and the deed to a tiny cabin I inherited from my uncle in Oregon, a place I'd always dreamed of fixing up but never had the courage to. She didn't know about it. Not even a whisper. I had mentioned it once, before we were married, and her face scrunched like I'd confessed to wanting to live in a tree. So I let it go. Until now. I didn't touch anything else. I didn't leave a note. I locked the front door on my way out and walked down the street, where I'd parked a rental car a few blocks away. Something about slipping away quietly felt poetic, not cowardly, just calculated. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was on the losing end of something. Back at the cabin, I lit a fire. Opened the laptop. Plugged in the hard drive. I thought I'd look at old photos or maybe read some of the journal entries I typed and hidden from her. But instead, something caught my eye. A folder I didn't remember naming, D-messages. I clicked. And suddenly, the room wasn't cold anymore. My chest burned with something between rage and disbelief. The folder was filled with saved text conversations. Not mine. Hers. Messages between Dana and a contact named D. Kissmark. I couldn't breathe. D. He has no idea. He still thinks you're planning the ski trip with him. What a joke. Dana, I know. I almost feel bad sometimes. Then he folds my laundry and I remember I'm married to a ghost. Another one. D. So when do I get my own drawer? Dana. Soon. He's getting suspicious. Might be time to push him. And then the worst one. Dana. He's soft. Not a man. I married a question mark. I sat back in the chair, hands shaking. She hadn't just cheated. She had documented it, saved it, labeled it, like she wanted to relive it later. Or worse, show someone. There was no mention of the man's real name. Just D. But I'd seen the photos Noah gave me. The man driving the dark blue Mazda. The same one I saw parked once, late at night, 3 blocks from our house when she said she was working late. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Now I remembered the license plate. Dec. 046. D wasn't just a letter. It was Declan, her coworker, the one I wasn't supposed to worry about. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there and read the messages over and over, like scratching at a wound to make sure it was still there. It was. And what's worse, there was one last message, dated 4 days before the dinner, the one where she made her little speech, where she humiliated me in front of my family. Dana, after this week, I'll be free. He's falling apart on his own. He won't survive much more. She wasn't just cheating. She was trying to break me deliberately, and she thought I'd crumble quietly. But I had other plans. It's funny what your mind clings to when your entire identity shatters. Some people rage. Some drink. Some crash their lives into something louder just to feel the echo. Me? I vacuumed the cabin. No music. No shoes. Just the low hum of an old vacuum running over floorboards I didn't even care about. Maybe I was trying to erase the dust Dana had left in my head. Or maybe I needed to control one small thing after finding out I was nothing but a temporary character in my wife's love story with another man. There was no plan. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to call her out in front of friends or explode her world with evidence. That would require confrontation, and I wasn't built for that. I was built for holding it in, for organizing pain into boxes and stacking them high enough that I could live under their shadow like it was shelter. But something shifted the moment I saw those messages. She had predicted my silence. Counted on it. She wanted a clean getaway, not a fight, a fade-out. And that's exactly what I was going to give her, just not the kind she expected. 3 days later, I returned to town. Quietly. I didn't go back to our house. I didn't even use my real name at the motel I checked into. I told them I was Arthur Brenner. Don't ask me where that came from. It just sounded like someone who didn't cry when folding shirts. I rented a car that looked nothing like mine and parked across the street from her office. Not to stalk. Not to confront. I just needed to see her. To look at her as if she were a stranger. Because honestly, she was. And what I saw made everything snap into place. She walked out at 5:41 p.m. sharp heels. Black coat. Her phone in one hand. A coffee she hadn't paid for in the other. And then, there he was. Declan. He leaned against the car like a movie cliché. That overconfident, sunburnt smugness that makes women like Dana melt and men like me doubt themselves. She laughed before she even reached him, tossed her hair back like she hadn't spent a decade rolling her eyes at my jokes. She kissed him openly. No shame, no hesitation, no sense that anyone might see. Maybe that was part of the thrill. They got into his car and pulled off toward the west side of town, the part with wine bars, rooftop lounges, and hotels that pretend they don't rent by the hour. I didn't follow them. Instead, I drove to a storage unit on Milton Street. Mine. Paid for in cash every year. I hadn't been there since 2018. Inside were boxes full of things Dana never knew existed, old journals, backup drives, even the last unopened letter my mother wrote before she passed. I sat down on the cold concrete floor and opened one of the boxes marked C. Curtis, pre-Dana. Inside was a spiral-bound notebook with a note I had written to myself on the first page. If you're reading this, it means you lost yourself again. Stop trying to win people who bet against you. Start remembering who you were before they taught you to shrink. I hadn't even remembered writing that. I closed the notebook and just sat there. No plan. No revenge. But I had a thought. What if I gave her everything she wanted? What if I made it easy for her to be free, so easy it haunted her? No drama. No begging. No confrontation. Just gone. That night, I emptied our joint account. Half of it was legally mine. The other half? I left it. I didn't want her money. I wanted her to feel the absence of mine. I called the HR department at my job and asked them to send my last 2 paychecks to a P.O. box in another state. I canceled the lease on the house. My name was the only one on it. She'd never bothered to update the paperwork. And then I did something that even surprised me. I sent Dana an email. Just one line. You won. I'm gone. No more ghost. No threats. No accusations. Just confirmation. Cold, clean, surgical. Then I turned off the phone. For good. 3 days later, my brother Felix texted Noah. Apparently, Dana had come home to find half the furniture gone. The fridge empty. Her closet untouched, but the wall safe? Cleaned out. She called the police. Filed a missing persons report. But I wasn't missing. I had never been more deliberate. I was in the wind, moving state by state, staying in short-term rentals, teaching myself how to breathe again. It took her 2 weeks to stop calling my family. For weeks to stop posting concerned messages online. 6 weeks to realize no one was coming back to answer her. But just when I thought she might finally let it go, something happened. And it all started with a letter I received in Oregon. No name. No return address. Just 2 words scribbled on the envelope in blue pen. He knows. I stared at the envelope for nearly 20 minutes before opening it. It was pale blue, standard stationery size, folded once as if the person who left it needed it to fit into something it wasn't meant to. The words, "he knows," were scrawled with a felt-tip pen that bled slightly at the curves, rushed handwriting. Left-handed maybe. No return address. No stamp. Which meant it wasn't mailed. It was placed. My cabin in Oregon was miles off the main road, surrounded by trees that didn't speak and wildlife that didn't care. No one just stumbled across it. You don't get visitors by accident when you disappear properly. So either someone followed me, or someone knew where to look. I opened it carefully, half expecting a second sheet or a printed photo, something more dramatic, but there was nothing else. Just those 2 words. He knows. I read it over and over again, as if repetition might trigger a memory or unlock some hidden message between the lines. But nothing came. Who was he? Declan? What did he know? About the messages? About my quiet vanishing act? About Dana's role in it all? I thought I had erased myself clean. But ghosts always leave footprints, even if the living don't notice them right away. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with the letter on the kitchen table, staring out the window toward the woods. At one point, around 3 a.m., I thought I saw headlights flicker between the trees, but they vanished before I could blink twice. Probably my mind playing tricks. Or maybe not. The next morning, I drove into town. Quietly. Slowly. Trying not to think like a fugitive but also failing miserably. I stopped at a small hardware store and bought a trail cam, some gloves, and a fresh padlock for the gate that guarded the long gravel road to my cabin. I smiled at the cashier. He didn't smile back. As I walked out, I noticed a flyer taped to the bulletin board near the door. It was a missing person notice. My face. The photo was old. A Christmas party shot Dana had posted 3 years ago. I was holding a plate of food, blinking mid-photo, awkward and unaware. The caption below read, Curtis Wentworth, last seen on December 10th. If seen, please contact authorities. She'd made it look like I was unstable, vulnerable, possibly hard. The kind of man people search for. I should have felt violated, furious. Instead, I laughed. Loud, breathless, not quite human laughter. I had vanished to escape the role she had assigned me, and now she was performing my disappearance for the world. Dana had turned my silence into her sympathy. That's when it clicked. The letter wasn't a warning. It was bait. Someone wanted me to break cover, to reach out, to make one mistake. Because maybe they weren't finished with me yet. Maybe Dana didn't like the silence after all. Or maybe Declan didn't. Back at the cabin, I went full survival mode. Locked down everything. I installed the camera, secured the perimeter, and unplugged every device that had a signal. I started keeping a journal again, a real one, handwritten, stored in the wood stove when not in use. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not just from the woods, from my past. Every message, every photo, every small piece I left behind had become a thread. And someone had started pulling. Then, on the 6th day, a man showed up. Not at the cabin, at the gas station 6 miles down. Noah called me. Kurt, he said, voice low, rushed. I don't know what the hell is going on, but there's a guy here asking questions. Not a cop. I asked. He won't say who he is. What kind of questions? About you. If I've heard from you. If I know where you are. And get this, he had photos. Printed ones. Your house. Your car. Even the driveway near your brother's place. Looks like surveillance. Real stuff. I went quiet. My hand tightened around the steering wheel. I hadn't spoken to anyone outside of Noah in over a month. He's not wearing a badge, Noah continued, but he walks like a guy who knows no one will stop him. What did you tell him? Nothing. I played dumb. But listen, I don't think he's Dana's guy. I think he's watching her, too. What makes you say that? Because he had a photo of her, too. One I've never seen before. Her, at night, crying in her car, parked outside a hotel. My mouth went dry. The letter. The photos. The silence. Someone else was inside the story now, someone I hadn't invited. Someone with their own endgame. And I was starting to realize, maybe I wasn't the only one who disappeared. Maybe Dana had done something even she was afraid of. And now, the ghost wasn't me. It was him. The first thing I noticed when I finally saw him was how calm he looked. That kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, it comes from practice. Like he'd been doing this a long time. I didn't confront him. I didn't follow him. I watched from across the street, seated in a borrowed car with tinted windows and a radiator that rattled like my chest. He walked like someone who had every right to be where he was. No hat. No sunglasses. No attempt to blend in. That was the trick. He didn't need to. He stopped in front of Dana's office. Looked up. Stayed there for a long beat. He didn't pull out a phone or take a photo. He just looked. And then he walked off, disappearing behind a UPS truck like he'd melted into the city. I didn't move for several minutes. Something had shifted. I could feel it. Like the weight of the story I thought I understood had suddenly doubled in my hands. Dana hadn't just betrayed me. She had walked into something far more dangerous than another man. And now the ripple was touching me. That night, back at the cabin, I sat with everything open. The printed messages. The photos. The letter. My journal. I was trying to thread it all together, some pattern, some logic to why this stranger was trailing both of us. And then I remembered something that didn't make sense at the time. For years ago, Dana disappeared for 2 days. We were supposed to visit her aunt in Idaho. She told me work got in the way. An emergency conference in Chicago. She even showed me an itinerary, 1 page, vague hotel name, no contact number. I didn't question it. I trusted her. I thought asking too many questions made me look insecure. She used to say I needed to be less suspicious. So I let it go. But now? Now I was wondering what happened in Chicago. I pulled up my laptop, used an old VPN trick Noah had taught me back in our college days, and started digging. First, into her email backups. Yes, I'd saved them. Then into travel logs, flight records, anything I could legally scrape from public access tools. And there it was. Dana didn't go to Chicago. She flew to New York. Specifically, Queens. A tiny hotel near a courthouse. She stayed under her maiden name, which I hadn't heard her use in years. The credit card she used wasn't one I recognized. And that wasn't even the strangest part. She booked a second room. 2 names were on the receipt. One of them hers. The other? Declan Voss. Not D. Not Declan from her office. No. Declan Voss, a federal subcontractor. I froze. I ran the name through every database I could find. His credentials weren't fake. He wasn't some mystery lover. He was registered. With clearances. Former military intelligence turned private investigator. Specialized in fraud, internal surveillance, and federal witness protection transitions. Why would Dana be sleeping with him? And why was he watching her now? Unless she wasn't sleeping with him at all. She was working with him. Or worse, against him. That's when the second envelope arrived. No postmark. Hand-delivered again. But this one didn't say he knows. It said, "You weren't the target. She was. You just got in the way." Inside was a single photo. Dana. Sitting in a courtroom. Next to a woman I'd never seen before. But the name printed on the bottom corner of the document made my blood freeze. Witness number 4, Dana W., confidential asset, ID #3917, A. I dropped the photo. Not because I was scared. Because I finally understood. I had spent months grieving a betrayal that wasn't even about me. She hadn't just humiliated me. She'd lied to everyone. And someone, somewhere, was cleaning up her mess. I just hadn't realized yet whether I was part of the cleanup or the collateral. I stayed up until dawn, staring at the photo of Dana in the courtroom. Everything I'd built in my mind, the story where she was just a cruel wife, a cheater, a woman who'd humiliated me out of boredom or resentment, it collapsed. Now I saw her face in that courtroom not as the villain of my story, but as someone who was caught in a web that went far beyond marriage and betrayal. The woman sitting beside her in that photo? I ran her through several image databases, facial recognition tools, and eventually found her in an archived article from 6 years ago. Federal embezzlement case. Sealed trial. Witness list redacted. But the article had a blurry courtroom sketch, and Dana's profile was unmistakable. She'd been there. Not as a bystander. not as support, as a cooperating witness. I scrolled back through everything in my memory, her unexplained trips, the tension she used to carry in her jaw that I thought was about work, her sudden change in phone numbers twice in 1 year, the camera system she asked to install at the house, saying it was for porch pirates. At the time, I believed it. But now? Now I realized she hadn't just lied to me about a man. She'd lied to me about who she was, who we both were. I didn't know if Declan was protecting her, blackmailing her, or trying to bring her down. But I did know this. I had stumbled into something built on secrets I was never meant to uncover. And the moment I left, I stopped being a husband and became a variable, unpredictable, unscripted, and, therefore, dangerous. That's why the letter didn't warn me. It marked me. Noah called again 2 days later. I could hear the wind in the background. He was walking somewhere. Probably pacing, which he only did when things were bad. I just had someone knock on my door, he said. Didn't say who they were, but they knew your name. My name. Asked if I knew anything about the name Serenity Logistics. Sound familiar? I froze. I hadn't heard that name in nearly 7 years. Dana had once worked for them, a private contractor. She said it was mostly marketing, promotional strategy for new tech startups. I barely paid attention. At the time, I was deep in a software project of my own, and our conversations were mostly surface level. Kurt, Noah continued, they were wearing government tags. Not badges. Not police. Just clipped credentials. The kind you don't Google. The kind you don't ask about. I closed my eyes and breathed in through my nose. The air in the cabin was sharp, pine-soaked, almost sterile. I stood up and walked to the back wall, where I'd started mapping things out: photos, names, printouts, timelines. Serenity Logistics. Declan Voss. Dana W. They were all pieces of a puzzle that had nothing to do with me until I vanished. Until I became proof of something uncontrolled. A man who'd seen too much, without knowing what he was seeing. And then it hit me. Maybe Dana's humiliation of me at that dinner wasn't about boredom. Maybe it was a warning. A push. An invitation to leave quietly. Because maybe, just maybe, she wasn't trying to hurt me. Maybe she was trying to save me. But I didn't leave quietly enough. The third envelope came the next morning. This time, it was taped to the side of my mailbox. No name. No message. Just a small black USB. I didn't plug it into my laptop. That would have been stupid. Instead, I used a burner tablet I'd picked up in town and opened the contents offline. There was only one file. A video. It was grainy, black and white, silent, security footage. Of me. Sitting at the cabin table. Reading her messages. Flipping through the courtroom photo. The footage was from inside the cabin. Taken from the corner. A place where no camera had ever been. Someone had been in my home. And they wanted me to know it. I stood up so fast the chair behind me clattered onto the floor. My heart thudded so loudly I could hear it in my teeth. I backed away from the table, turned in a full circle, scanned the room, windows locked, doors bolted, trail cam untouched. But it didn't matter. They'd already been here. Probably while I was asleep. Maybe the night I thought I heard branches snapping. Maybe the night the fire had gone out earlier than it should have. They didn't steal anything. They didn't leave fingerprints. They left proof. Proof that I was never alone, not for a second. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me gone for good. Not dead. Just erased. Just like Dana had tried to do. Only now, I wasn't sure if I still had time to disappear or if someone had already decided how the final chapter would end. And then my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. But the voice on the other end? I'd know it anywhere. Dana. And she said only 3 words. You need to run. Her voice didn't shake. You need to run, Dana said again, lower this time. As if someone could be listening, even over a phone line already being watched. I didn't respond. Not right away. I stood in the middle of the cabin, staring at the blacked-out screen of the burner tablet, the USB still plugged in. She sounded older than I remembered. Not tired. Hollow. Like someone who had finally run out of lies to tell herself. Curtis, she whispered, you were never supposed to see any of it. I thought if I pushed you hard enough, you'd hate me and walk. You did. That was good. But then you started looking. And now they think you're part of it. Part of what? I asked, my voice hoarse. There was a long pause. Then, it doesn't matter anymore. I've given them everything they want. But you need to disappear for real. Not your name. Not your face. You. They won't chase you if you vanish fully. I sat down slowly. Why are you helping me? Another pause. And then she said something I never expected to hear. Because you were the only person in my life who was good, and I treated you like a tool, like a placeholder. And now I can't undo that. But I can help you survive. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was the closest thing Dana would ever say to love. She gave me a name. A man in Colorado who worked quietly, off-grid, helping people vanish for real, not with fake passports or crimes, but by erasing online identities, redirecting data trails, rebuilding lives from scratch in rural corners of the world that no one cared to look at. I didn't ask how she knew him. I didn't need to. I burned the USB, the files, the photos, the court documents. Not out of fear, but because I realized something powerful. I no longer needed answers. I no longer needed her betrayal to make sense. I had something more valuable than vengeance or closure. I had myself again. 3 weeks later, Curtis Wentworth officially disappeared. Noah drove me halfway across the country. We didn't talk much on the drive, but the silence was warm, not heavy. Like brothers who didn't need to fill the air to feel connected. He dropped me near a farm with no name, a mailbox that hadn't been checked in a decade, and a barn that creaked in the wind like it was telling secrets. And there I stayed. Not as a ghost. Not as a fugitive. As someone reborn in stillness. I started working with my hands again. I built things. Fences. Chicken coops. Furniture. I read books that had dust on them. I watched sunrises with black coffee and the sound of the world waking slowly. Some nights I thought of her. Of what she gave up. What I lost. What neither of us ever really understood until it was too late. But I didn't miss her. I missed the man I tried to be for her. And now, finally, I could be him, but for me. I got a dog. Named him Chaplin because he made me laugh when I didn't expect to. I didn't need anyone to know my new name, or where I slept, or what my past used to be. And that's what made it beautiful. I was no longer a husband. No longer a ghost. No longer a variable in someone else's plan. I was just a man, quietly alive, deeply peaceful, and finally, completely free. And for the first time in years, I didn't need to run from anything anymore.